Welcome to my review for VHS 2, which came out in 2013 and featured stories from a largely different set of directors from what we got the first time around. One or two returnees, but a lot of first-time directors as well. There's one less story this time, which I think is a good thing. I said in my review for the original VHS that there was probably one segment too many on there. I could even pinpoint the one that I would have taken out. So in terms of length, VHS 2 scores an early point today over its predecessor. I'm not going to spend any time talking about what this series is or what a horror anthology is. I think if you're watching a review for VHS 2, you likely know the score by now, whether you've seen the second one yet or not. Although on that note, I should point out that there will be spoilers today. So in terms of how I'm going to approach the review, I'm going to start off by saying a few words about the framing device, wraparound, whatever you want to call it, and then I'm going to take each story in turn in the order in which you see them in the movie, and then I'll finish off with the conclusion a bit later on. So let's then jump into the seedy world of VHS 2, and it is seedy. There's lots of unnecessary tit shots in this film and in the series as a whole, or maybe they're not unnecessary. Make your own mind up. If you saw my review for the first film, you'll know that I really didn't like the wraparound segment in that. It was by far the weakest part of the first VHS. But clearly the producers of these films did not share my opinion, because instead of doing something fresh with this sequel, they've just doubled down on the story from the first film and tried to extend it, sort of. So we get this couple who are like a PI tag team. They've been sent on a job to the house from the first film to find somebody's son, I think. I only saw this film a few nights ago and I'm already starting to get hazy on the exact events that happen in this wraparound segment because it's all so forgettable. I think it's the house from the first movie. It seems to have the same setup with the TVs and the VHS tapes, and the girl of this couple, she starts to watch these tapes, and those are the stories that we ourselves end up seeing throughout the rest of the movie. And towards the end we come back to this wraparound and there are various things happening, like somebody blows their own head off, I think, and one or two other things, but it all feels like just shit being thrown at a wall and they're hoping that something's going to stick. You're going to find something to enjoy in all this. I didn't. It's just one big mess, just like the wraparound story in the first movie. This one's not as bad as the one from the original, simply because we don't have to hang out with those arseholes in the criminal gang this time around. At least this couple that we get this time are sort of likeable, I suppose. But that's not saying much. I just don't like what they've done with the wraparound story from these first two VHS films. It's not my cup of tea at all, and I would have to say again that this is the weakest part of this film. Whenever you're making a horror anthology film, I think you've got to be looking to make your opening story, if not your strongest, then certainly one of your strongest. A lot of people will watch these sorts of films on streaming platforms. You do get your traditionalists out there like me who'll go for the physical copy, but you hardly ever see these sorts of films at cinemas. Most people will watch them via things like Netflix and Amazon Prime, and there's always the danger that if the first story is not very good, then people will switch off. As to whether that bothers the makers of films like this, I don't know, but certainly the opening tale in VHS 2 is nowhere near as good as the equivalent story from the first film, the one with the flying female succubus thing, whatever you want to call it. So in this one we get a guy whose eye was destroyed in a car accident, but this private medical company has agreed to put a bionic one in for him for free, just so long as he lets them film through his eye for a couple of weeks, just to make sure that the thing's working properly, because it's an experimental model. But when he gets home, he realises that this bionic eye gives him the power to see apparitions and various other things that a normal human eye can't. I'd love to know what this guy does for a living, by the way. He lives in the most swanky pad. It looks like it cost about $5 million. It's got this amazing view of all these valleys and things. My guess is that he's some sort of really great video game designer for a company like Rockstar or something. He's single and his apartment's all messy, but we're getting way off topic. I'm not sure if the apparitions that he sees are actually ghostly, because at the end of this story they get physical and start to grapple with him. So again, the whole thing is a little bit messy. The story gets a much needed shot in the arm when this female character turns up, apparently suffering from the same thing that he is, although she doesn't last very long. It's all just very humdrum for an opening story. This is the sort of thing that I would probably prefer to put like second from last in the running order. It reminds me of a film called Body Parts, which came out, I think, in the early 90s. Jeff Fahey starred in that. He played this character who lost his arm in a car crash, so he got a fake arm. Or it's the arm of a dead person grafted on, but it turned out it was the arm of a criminal, and so it started to play up. I think he tried to strangle his own wife in the middle of the night. So this story that we have here feels like it's of a similar flavour to that, but it's certainly not in the same quality, and like I said, it's nowhere near as good as the opener from the first VHS. This is a traditional sort of the zombie apocalypse is just starting sort of tale. The twist being that we follow the action from a zombie's point of view, because this particular guy had a camera wrapped around his head at the time that he died. So for a while we see him bumbling through some woods, killing some more people. Eventually he gets to a birthday party, and this is the best part of the segment because it gets all chaotic and anything goes. You've got a few people at the party who are just crap at dealing with zombies. That whole part is quite fun. On the whole, again, we're not really tearing up any trees with this. There's nothing special about this particular segment. I kind of feel like the whole thing would have worked better as a standalone episode of The Walking Dead, you know, something that they could have thrown in halfway through a season just for a bit of variety, just show an entire episode from a zombie's point of view as it walks around, occasionally coming into contact with some of the main series characters. As it is, we get the idea presented as a short in VHS 2. It's all right, but again, it's passable fare. It's nothing amazing. Just in the nick of time, we get a really excellent one. This is the first story today that I could easily believe could have been on the first VHS film in terms of quality. It was directed by Gareth Evans with help from some other guy whose name I can't pronounce. Gareth Evans was the guy who did the Raid movies. Excellent movies, both of those. So in this story we get a group of documentary makers who travel to this inner city compound to interview members of a weird cult, but as soon as they get in there, they realise that this place is starting to self-implode. The cult leader, who's a really weird guy, he's been dabbling in things that he shouldn't have done, and it turns out there's some kind of goat demon thing about to be born, and it's going to make everybody in the compound go completely nuts and start murdering each other and doing all sorts of other weird things. I don't even know where to start with this one. Once it gets going, it just seems to be one absolutely batshit crazy scene after the other. All the protagonists sort of split off in different directions, and so it's a little bit confusing keeping up with who's where and who's left and what's going on. The cult leader's role in all this is probably the most fascinating. Keep a close eye on him when you watch this story. But on the whole, I really, really enjoyed it. The cynic in me says that, again, it's a little bit of a case of throwing a load of crap at the wall and hoping that something sticks. But in this instance, I think this works for this story better than it did for the framing narrative. I'm not entirely sure that the ending was necessary. One of the documentary guys gets out and the demon goat thing follows and crashes his car, and you get this one final shot of the creature, but it just looks a bit crap at that point, and I don't think it was necessary. I think you could have just had this one character get away, panting really hard as he realises that he's escaped the carnage, leave the creature back in the compound, but the whole story is still really, really good. Finally, we have found an excellent segment in VHS 2. This is the film's final story, and to my amazement, it's my favourite of the bunch. So VHS 2 really recovers in the second half with Safe Haven and then this one. It's about a group of kids of mixed ages who somehow find themselves left unattended by their various parents one weekend night, and aliens come for them. It's not clear whether the aliens are coming to simply spirit them away for a bit and then return them after they've done some experimentation, or whether the aliens simply want to kill them. And I really like that about this story, the ambiguity as to whether the kids live or die at the end. I love the mixed age aspect to this. It makes the slumber party feel very natural, almost as if it's been unplanned. I could easily imagine situations like this cropping up in towns all across America. And because these kids are at different stages of their adolescent developments, they don't fully get on with each other. They don't respect each other's privacy when it comes to certain things. So the two older kids, who I think are in a relationship, they get caught in bed by the younger kids. And then a bit later on, the girl who got caught in bed with her boyfriend, she catches one of the younger kids masturbating. This could all feel very seedy, but it doesn't. They just feel like the sort of tales that could have happened to anybody when they were growing up. And then those people will have to make the decision as to whether to retell these stories as anecdotes when they're a bit older, or whether to just completely forget them. The stuff with the aliens is very atmospheric. It moves at a good pace. I think the found footage aspect works very well here. You do see some of the aliens, but not too much. I think they're very creepy in this. And you get this tragic situation with a dog who almost certainly dies regardless of what happens to the kids. Yeah, I really liked this segment, if you couldn't already tell, and it's definitely the best of the bunch. So I think we're in a very strong position as we head to the conclusion, a much stronger position I thought we would be in when I was at around about the halfway point of VHS 2. The words I'm tempted to use right now are tale of two halves, but I think that would be quite harsh actually, because it's not like the stories in the first half of this film are bad. They're just a little bit average, but I think on the whole, when you've got two excellent stories and two average ones, I think when it comes to a horror anthology, you've done pretty well with that kind of assessment. I do think the story order is not right with this, but then again, different people may prefer different stories to me in this particular film, so take it as you will, but I certainly enjoyed the second half of VHS 2 more than I did the first half. The wraparound segment is pretty awful, just as it was in the original. So let's get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give this collection. One, two, three bloody axes out of 5. That is one full axe down on the amazingly good VHS 1, but this is still more than good enough for me to feel tons of enthusiasm for moving on with the next one in the franchise, VHS Viral. Join me for that again very soon. Bye for now.